All right. Well, we've had the draft, we've had the schedule release, and now you get to the down part of the year. But the NFL news keeps on coming with a big splash in the offseason, deal making market. Justin Jefferson becoming the highest paid non quarterback in NFL history, $35 million a year. The Vikings lock him up to a 4-year, $140 million deal with $110 million of it guaranteed. Incredible contract. And I saw you tweeted about it. I did too. That we both agree this was kind of a no-brainer for Minnesota, despite a lot of their struggles across their roster, to lock down what many would say is the best receiver in the NFL
Oh,
at
yeah.
this time, especially to do it before some of these other wide receivers start pushing that market further and further. I thought it was a great move by Minnesota, and now they can focus on the offseason with a young quarterback and not have this stuff in the back of their heads.
I mean, I said it last week when the Jalen Waddle deal got done, and I know we have some thoughts on that too, is like there's just more pressure mounting on Cincinnati and Minnesota to figure out what they're doing and how they're going to go about this. I think Minnesota's deal signifies to everyone else that if you're the agent of Jamar Chase or you're the agent of CeeDee Lamb right now, you look at it and you say, okay, that is now the benchmark. We cannot go above that, and we probably know we can't argue for more than that. So now we know we're worth more than an A.J. Brown, right, who was the highest paid wide receiver, but we're not going to be being paid more than Nick Bosa and Justin Jefferson. So where do we fall in that line? It's an interesting line of demarcation.
I feel like CD might have an argument, though, because I've seen a lot of comparisons. Like, he has more
CD
touchdowns
numbers
in their first, and they have a very comparable. They've both been in the league the same amount of time. Like, they both have a very comparable, spreadsheet to compare. And so, I mean, CD could make that argument because someone out there would pay him that, I would imagine. Like,
well, Dallas. I mean, he's in the right spot. He's in the right spot for the place to be paid. It's going to be really interesting to watch now. What happens with Jamar Chase? What happens with T. Higgins? What happens with CeeDee Lamb? Those are the three now names floating. I love this for Minnesota because this is what you should do, and this is what you can do when you have a rookie quarterback.
Yeah,
when your team commits to the rookie quarterback, it frees up, pay everyone else, and and make sure your superstars are happy, and build as much of a super team as you can. You don't have to pay. You hope that McCarthy's the right guy. And if he is the right guy, you don't have to pay him for at least 3 seasons. Like, that gives you this deal will be done in 3 seasons, right? Like, and what I love about this deal too is it's so front loaded. He getting $88 million guaranteed today at signing. That's insane to think about that check hitting your bank account, $88 million at signing. He might be able to get himself some things. You know what I mean? Like, he's got a little money, a little cash to burn up in Minnesota. But it is, I think it makes a lot of sense. And if you're a guy like Waddle, you're still like pumped. You're still you got paid a ton of money. You got paid a lot of guarantee, and you're not even the number one guy, right? Like, you get that pressure. Yeah. Waddle got a great deal. Like, if you're T. Higgins, you look at that and you go, crap. Like, that's the deal I want. But it's like, well, now my team's got to pay Jamar Chase money to, Justin Jefferson's money to Jamar Chase. To me, I think T. Higgins is probably going to have to find a new place to play football next year, and he'll get a nice deal next year. The smartest thing for him to do, in my opinion, is to play on that tag, put up giant numbers this year, and then make himself a ton of money next offseason. And I think the other smart thing to do is for the Bengals to sign Jamar Chase to a deal that looks similar, but a little less than this deal, and for the Cowboys to do the same. Similar, but a little less than this deal, and you move on. There's no wide receiver right now, in my opinion, that should be paid higher than Justin Jefferson. And to me, if you're going to pay a wide receiver higher than Justin Jefferson, let's see how the wide receiver market resets in a couple years. If there's a guy who shows up, what does a Marvin Harrison Jr. look like when he gets to the end of his rookie deal, right? Sure. And how big is the cap at that point in time? I don't feel like this number should be surpassed for at least 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Speaking about Jalen Waddle's deal, it was 3 years, $84.75 million, 76 of that guaranteed. So he's making 28.25 per
It's
year. And I agree with
crazy.
that. I think this is also signaling that, maybe I know that Tyreek still has another season after this year on his, contract, but it's much easier to get out of. Like, I'm wondering if
Yeah.
the Dolphins are sensing that maybe he's going to be retiring after the end of this year, or maybe
He
they're
talked about
trying to
it.
get a move off of it type of situation, because that is a lot of money for your number 2 wide receiver. But they're also seeing the trends where you got to put your money there.
Yeah.
This
But
also
Waddle,
signals they can't pay Tua what
yeah.
he's going to want now, because Hill and Waddle are making so much money.
I also think, though, it makes sense too that if you're gonna again go to a rookie quarterback next year, you know what I mean, or you're gonna make like
Yeah,
a move
right.
like that, you can pay it. You haven't paid Tua yet, so you might as well pay your weapons, especially when your quarterback is a Tua who needs really good weapons. And Waddle has shown to me that he can be a number one. Like if he
He
eventually
can.
is the
Yes,
number
he's got
one,
that talent for sure.
like in a year or two when this contract's still going and and he'll either retires or they re-sign him or he goes somewhere else. Like if Jalen Waddle is your number one, it feels like he's a one. Like he's a one. Like in the sense of like a DJ Moore is a one. They're not Jamar Chase. They're not Justin Jefferson, but they are really, really great weapon that if that's your number one weapon, you have a really solid offense.
Yeah, no question. If you missed our episode last week, go check it out. It was a quarterback tiers by division, breaking down how we would rank the quarterbacks based on their division in the
Yeah.
AFC and the NFC. Now we're going to do the same, only with head coaches, and this one's a little more up in the air than the quarterback one, I would say. So let's get into it. Our head coach tiers for this year in the NFL. Before we dive into our head coaching tiers by division, they want to pass along some breaking news that dropped today as well. Legendary Hall of Fame offensive lineman Larry Allen from the Dallas
Yeah.
Cowboys suddenly passed away on vacation at 52 years old. And, that's obviously terribly sad and very young. Don't know all of the details surrounding it, but obviously that's terrible. And, we were just talking about legendary offensive lineman earlier this year. And he was obviously on the short list of the greatest to ever do it. So, yeah, he will be missed. And that's a brutal loss for the NFL for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Larry Allen, truly, like if he's on your starting offensive line all team, you're not getting much debate from most people. He was
Exactly.
that kind of special player, and it was a huge component of a lot of those great Dallas Cowboys teams and offensive lines. And he'll be missed. And again, we don't know all the details now, but 52 is so young. It's just a real sad situation. Our hearts go out to his family and his friends and the Cowboys organization for sure.
So we were talking about doing the head coaching tiers for this one, and
Yeah.
we're going to start in the AFC and go through the different divisions in here. Any overall thoughts before we launch ourselves into the AFC North to start things off? What was going through your head when you were making these lists?
Well, what was going through my head was it's like when we were doing this with the quarterbacks last week, there was those divisions that stood out. You're like, ooh, there's a lot of question marks at quarterback. And it feels like there's a lot of question marks in coaches in the same places. There's the question marks in quarterback. So like the NFC South, the quarterback's kind of like, who's, and it's like the coaches, a lot of, I don't know. Same thing with like the AFC South. We talked about the young quarterbacks and how they could skyrocket. Well, you have a lot of young coaches. We just and levels of coaching where it's like, Doug Peterson's the veteran with the Super Bowl ring, but then Shane Steichen's the brilliant offensive mind, but his quarterback's huge question mark. I also think there's one division that stands out to me that is a far and above the rest, because the person I have at number 4 is someone who went to a Super Bowl and is someone who, what I saw them do last year especially, really impressed me. And it's like, well, I'm putting them 4. I don't think that, like, what did we say with the quarterbacks last week where it's like, that's the best number 4? I already know it's like, what division's my best number 4 by far? Like, that number 4, I would take him as my head coach right now. Certain divisions are blessed, and that's also what makes certain divisions really hard to predict. And so it's very funny how some of those overlap, where it's like the quarterback and the coaching controversies and questions seem to fall in a lot of the same spots.
Yeah, no, that's very true, and we're gonna give our thoughts at the end of the show on those head coach quarterback combos. So stay tuned for
Yeah,
that. But we will
that's gonna be
begin
fun.
here with the AFC North, looking at the tiers here. So I don't know if there's much debate. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Mike Tomlin for me is the clear front runner in this division, but I know there's going to be a lot that might disagree with that because of his lack of overall playoff success. But to me, he's still the best coach in this division.
I have Harbaugh at 1, and it's
All
only
right.
if you would have told me this, if we would have done this 3 off seasons ago, I would have been with you 100%. Tomlin. 2 off seasons ago, I'd have been like, yeah, it's probably still Tomlin. Last off season, I've been like, oh man, probably go with Tomlin. But I think there's been an erosion in the last couple of years that I'm struggling to wrap my head around. Like, Mike's value is obvious. Like, it's obvious his value. And I think he's a really, really great head coach. But here's what else. So this is I think part of this was I have a case for Jim, and I wanted to put him 1 because I knew you'd put Tomlin 1. So here's my case for Jim, right? What do we always say about the Steelers? How many head coaches? How many John Harbaugh, yeah. How many head coaches in the last 60 years?
3, yeah.
Yeah. So how many head coaches for the Ravens over the last 60 years?
Well, I mean, if we'll count the Browns before because they're technically the Browns, right? Yeah, but I mean,
so
in the last 25, it's been Brian
2.
Billick and John Harbaugh. So,
but what I'll say is, I think for Tomlin, he would join an organization with incredible institutionalized success and incredible institutionalized like leadership and stability. Harbaugh is, to me, now what really puts the Ravens on the map as like a, wow, look at this team that now has incredible institutionalized success and stability. Brian Billick was there a long time and was a very solid coach. I think Harbaugh has taken it to the next level.
They won a Super Bowl and had legendary defenses.
Yeah. Yes, no. I agree, and but I think now when you look at those 2, it's like Harbaugh has helped carry the water in the way that Coward did for the Steelers, right? Like, and I don't know what's next after John Harbaugh and how long he'll be there, but I also do think that John Harbaugh gets a lot of credit for the Lamar Jackson transition. You go from Joe Flacco and a very traditional style of offense, and you have now on multiple offensive coordinators for Lamar, but found a way for him to win 2 MVPs with different offensive coordinators and found success with this transition to the modern NFL game and the way that the Ravens have. I think a lot of that falls on Harbaugh as far as creating a culture where that is successful. And I think his success recently gives me a little more of an edge for right now who's the best head coach in that division. I think I would lean towards Harbaugh in the modern NFL right now, feeling really comfortable. I think this is the closest race, and I'm not going to fight you. Again, I think it would be very 50-50 if we polled a lot of people, Harbaugh versus Tomlin right now, and I think both camps are very right.
It's possible. I think it's more, to me, it's more clear of a decision, but it's still one of the harder ones in this whole thing. But I still think it's clear Tomlin, because I just think that if we leveled playing fields, that Tomlin has the advantage. If Tomlin had Lamar Jackson, like because you mentioned, like, if I asked you about like 3 years ago, you would say Tomlin. Well, what's happened the past 3 years? Tomlin's had Kenny Pickett and, the very last vestiges of a aging Ben Roethlisberger, and also Mason Rudolph and Mitch Trubisky. Like, I don't know what John Harbaugh would have been able to do with that. I'm skeptical as to whether he would have been able to go 500 the last couple of years with the teams that the Steelers had.
My point in saying that was like, John Harbaugh, like
created the environment for Lamar,
Mike's
whereas
only
Tomlin
success,
gave
Mike's
him Matt
only
Canada.
success has been with Big Ben, and when Big Ben was in his
Right.
prime.
No, that's
And
just
we
true.
would both argue, Big Ben is better than Aaron Rodgers. Like you and I both agree that I think overall, when you maybe look at it in totality, Big Ben and Aaron Rodgers should be 1-1A, like they should be right next to each other. So, and I agree with you. It's tough. His GM has put him in a tough spot. They have not been good at the quarterback position the last couple of years. He has fought his ass off to stay above 500. But Tomlin's incredible. I love Tomlin. I love Tomlin. I hate arguing against him.
No, and I love John Harbaugh too. I mean,
and I think,
two of the best coaches in the league are in this division. I mean,
they're
both, in my view, top 8 in the league.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, I get where you're coming from. John Harbaugh's number 2 for me. I'm guessing Tomlin's number 2 for you then.
Tomlin's 2. Okay. Tomlin's 2. And this is the division I said is the hardest one. I think this is the best coach division in football.
It probably is. Because
if Tomlin's
4, I actually struggled with.
Yeah, I have Stefanski 3, and I go with Zach Taylor at 4. Stefanski, I give him the nod because I've seen what he's done now with multiple quarterbacks, from Baker to Joe Flacco with Deshaun Watson. And he really is, I think, a very smart offensive coach. And I think he understands modern NFL football really well. But Zach Taylor, at this time last year, I would have had Zach Taylor probably still a clear 4. But I think he gets more credit from me now after doing what he did with Jake Browning. Like, because a lot of it was just, he's got Joe Burrow. Well, look what he did with that offense of Jake Browning, where they almost made the Cincinnati Bengals almost made the playoffs without Joe Flacco. They did not fall apart. And there was one of the reasons why I think I'm so high on them to be a playoff team this upcoming year is that roster is very much, I think, got better. They added to it. If they could figure out the wide receivers and keep them happy and get them both to play, and Burrow's healthy, I think Zach Taylor's a very good coach. I would have Zach Taylor as my head coach over Matt Eberflus tomorrow if you told me I could. So I'm not me putting Zach Taylor here for Bengals fans. Don't jump down my throat. I like Zach Taylor a ton. Should he maybe get the nod over Stefanski because he's been to Super Bowl? Yeah, you can make that argument. There's something about Stefanski, though, that I think he's a better maybe overall leader of men and CEO. I've seen more of that from him in a really dysfunctional organization in Cleveland with a ton of dysfunction around him. He handled it well. He didn't ask for Deshaun Watson. Maybe he did, but he's inherited this mess, and he's done nothing but be successful with it overall. And I think he deserves a ton of credit for that.
This, for me, was a 50-50 toss-up. I ended up giving a slight edge to Zach Taylor because of his success. I mean, I know that
he's great.
A lot of people would point to Joe Burrow, and that's, you can't deny that, but he still got to a Super Bowl. You mentioned it, like last year with Jake Browning, like making sure the ship didn't completely sink and fall off. There's something to be said for that for Zach Taylor. And I think one of the biggest things is that Kevin Stefanski has at least had a top 6 or 7 roster since he's been there.
It's true.
And Zach Taylor, outside of Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, like he really hasn't. He's had a terrible defensive grouping of personnel, less than stellar offensive line. And so, yeah, I think Stefanski has had a lot going for him in terms of what to work with. Now, the quarterback thing has been a disaster. And so, yeah, he gets credit for sure for helping install a offensive system that is conducive to running the football, helping out that offensive line, and being able to make things work with Joe Flacco and getting them into the playoffs, things like that. I mean, that's stellar work. So I like them both a lot. They're both offensive-minded coaches. Yeah, Stefanski would probably work in more places. But right now, Zach Taylor feels just like the perfect right fit for Cincinnati. They just need to get more. They have the weakest GM. I was going to say this is one of the strongest GM divisions as well. Kevin Colbert struggled for the Steelers towards the end of his career, but now that Omar Khan has come in, he's made some great deals for the Steelers. Eric DeCosta took over for Ozzie Newsome. Like, what a great track record there of GMs for the Ravens. And then you got Andrew Berry in Cleveland, who his story still to be written, but they have a really good roster there. And so, yeah, I just think that's what gave the edge to Zach Taylor for me. But it could go either way.
My final point of this, I misspoke earlier. It's my second best coach division in NFL. And then I think my what I'll say about Zach Taylor is I'm really excited to see what he does this year without Brian Callahan. So he's had Brian Callahan with Burrow since they took the job. Callahan's now the head coach in Tennessee. We'll talk about that coming on up here in a second. And so now it's like, all right, is it more Zach Taylor, the offensive mind, and Callahan was working with what Taylor wanted to do, or was it, Brian Callahan was the reason that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all that worked. That's true. Yeah. We have a little bit of that. We'll learn a lot. And if Zach Taylor has a big year this year and a bounce back year with a new offensive coordinator and dealing with the drama of those wide receivers, he could shoot up this list for sure. You're not getting to 2 or 1, but you could solidify yourself as the third in this division. And that's saying something, because again, I think there's a lot of teams that would be happy with Zach Taylor as their head coach right now.
Oh, no doubt. Very talented division. All right, let's go to the South now. And we've got, obviously, Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee, Indianapolis. Where do you stand on this one? This the number 1 spot, I feel, is kind of a toss-up for me, but we'll see what you say.
Well, I went with Dougie Doug because he does have the Super Bowl. He brought Philly as their first and only ever Super Bowl. And Doug, overall, again, what he did his first year in Jacksonville to, again, steady those waters after the disaster that was Urban Meyer with the fingering in the butt and the kicking of the kicker. You got a lot, he had a lot to do there, and he did it. And so, yes, last year was a disappointment, but I don't know how much of that was on Doug. I just think sometimes, you have an off year and things didn't go well. I'm excited for Jacksonville this year. I think they're poised for a bounce back year. I go DeMeco 2. So that's the way I have it. I think DeMeco has earned the right to be in that conversation because of that one incredible year, his first year. But I pump the brakes a little bit and just say, all right, let's see it again. Let's see what year 2 looks like. Because, we talk about sophomore slumps with a quarterback. What about sophomore slumps for a coach and a quarterback together? Had such a successful year 1. What does year 2 look like? Are they reading the press clippings?
They set the bar pretty high.
Yeah, they set their bar very high. I'm not saying he has to go back to the second round of the playoffs, but is he going to have a year like Doug had last year, where there's some injuries or things don't go well, and all of a sudden you barely miss the playoffs? I don't want to trash him just because that happens either. So I have Doug 1, DeMeco 2. How's your 1-2 go?
It's the exact same for me too.
Great.
And yeah, for most of the reasons you said, I don't have much to add other than, Doug did have to completely turn around an organization and had to weather some, injuries, especially to Trevor. Trevor was less than 100% for the vast majority of last year, and that obviously hurt his performance. They also got wildly unlucky several times last year, I felt, with just a heel out of bounds in the end zone 6 times.
Yeah.
And just, crazy calls and just different things like that.
It's a frustrating year.
It was a frustrating year. I trust them. And you got to give DeMeco his flowers for the first year. But again, we have such a small sample size. It's hard to tell too much. And that's why Shane Steichen comes at 3 for me, because
same,
he, and it's not, super fair. It's just how you have to rank when you have knowledge of the, former 2. Shane, we have some knowledge, but he didn't have his quarterback for 90% of the season, and they still did pretty well. He did well with
almost made the playoffs.
Shane could move into the number 2 spot next year. We'll see what happens with Richardson, but we at least know stuff of Shane. We don't know anything about Brian Callahan, yet. And so that's Shane deserves that 3 spot. I don't know if that sounds backhanded or not, but I think he's a pretty good head coach. I think we'll find, that if he gets the full year of complement of, his weapons and his team, he'll be able to put out a quality product. This is one of those divisions that's still very much on the rise as a whole. And so there's a lot to be gleaned still from these groups and these teams. And I
have Steichen at 3, Brian Callahan at 4, and for the same reasons you just said. Shane is the one three we've talked about so far that, remember in the quarterbacks, we said, hey, this, like a Caleb Williams could go from 3-1. Shane feels like if the year
That's
they have
true.
this year, he could go 3-1 in this division. Like,
if they win the division,
this division is wide open as far as that goes. Like, who's the coach in the division? Doug can only live off of the Philadelphia success for so long. And so he needs and then for Brian Callahan, I'm beyond stoked to see what Tennessee looks like this year, because, Tennessee the last 2 years felt like they were holding on to their success of 3 and 4 years ago. And the success of 3 and 4 years ago was like run the football, Vrabel's intense defense, and then Tannehill made the throw when he needed to, right, to an A.J. Brown, and just like made the play when they needed to. And then last year and in this past year, the last 2 years, it felt very much like the defense stinks, but we're still this defensive culture. The running game is dying, but we're still this running game culture. And now we just don't have a quarterback anymore. And so I'm excited for the Titans to lean into, no, we're an offensive culture now. And like, we're just going to lean into offense. And we have a young quarterback with a big arm, and we're just going to lean into that. And so I'm really excited about watching Tennessee play football this year. And listen, if Brian Callahan can go to Will Levis and say, hey, this is how Joe Burrow sees it and what he does, I think Will Levis could have himself a really fun and exciting year. I think it also could implode because that wide receiver core has got age, and they have it's a young quarterback and a young offensive line, talent, an improving offensive line, but young, so it could implode as well. But I'm excited for them. I'm for the Titans. I truly am, and I love that the Bears play the Titans week 1, because I'll get like a full kind of taste of it week 1. I lost you. I can't hear you, Dan.
There we go. I had muted myself briefly as I tried to get my headphones situated. So we're all good. No, but I did hear what you said, and I agree. I agree for a lot of those reasons that you outlined there. So let's move on to the AFC East now, and we'll talk ourselves some
this is an interesting
Cowboys,
one.
Commanders, Eagles, and Giants. Yeah,
wait,
this
AFC
East,
an
interesting one.
East, AFC.
I'm sorry, AFC.
Bills, Jets, Dolphins, New England.
There you go.
I hate to do it, but I'm gonna. My number one is McDermott. Mike McDaniels. Sorry, Mike McDaniels, and I have McDermott 2. I like McDermott a lot. I really do. But I think in an offensive league, and knowing the coaching tree he's come from, and also he's now had 2 years. Like, because I remember with Mike McDaniels, it was very much like, who is this kid? Like, are guys even going to listen to him? He's such a nerdy little pot smoking, like, weird guy. But now it's 2 years of like, oh, no. Those dudes love him. And he's great at the microphone. And players respect his knowledge in the same way that they respect Sean McVay's knowledge and LaFleur's knowledge and Shanahan's knowledge. They come from that tree. So I have no problem going Mike McDaniels number 1. And then I do have Sean McDermott 2. I think McDermott is earned a top 1 or 2 ranking in this division. He's won the division, how many times in the last 4 years? I think 4 or 4. He's a very, very good modern defensive coach. He doesn't feel old school defensive coach. He does feel like a modern defensive coach. My issue with him is the 9/11 quotes. Don't love that. Don't love that.
Not his finest hour.
And let's be honest, we haven't seen him in the biggest games. We haven't seen his team break through. Whether that's his fault or not, it falls on him. So I have to put that on him.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Mike McDaniel takes that top spot for me. The ingenuity, the ability to, make lemonade from some sour lemons at times. And he's just been a really solid head coach in terms of the leadership category, because that was the big question. Is like, okay, we know he's really smart. Is he able to rally a group of men, especially with how young he is? Some players on the team were probably his age or a little bit older even. But no, he's proven that he's a really solid head coach. Sean McDermott's just had some of those ups and downs throughout.
Yeah.
and he has the benefit of having a top 3 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah,
And so you're gonna be expected to go on deep playoff runs consistently, and they just haven't done that to that consistent level. And the defense has really started to fall apart in recent years, and that's his bread and butter. That's like, it's like one thing you can't say about some of these, other coaches who it's their side of the ball. Like McVay has had turnover with his personnel, and he's still had a phenomenal offense every year. Kyle Shanahan, the same thing. So, Sean McDermott, you're expected to have like a top 5 to 7 defense, whether that's fair or not. It is what it is. And so, yeah, if they can get that supporting cast really around it and have a full package, then you should be good to go. But for right now, he's number 2 because of those reasons. Now he goes and wins a Super Bowl. Maybe he's number 1.
I mean, he's stuck. He's right now, he's the coach who we say can't win the big get, can't win the big one. Like he's the guy in the NFL right now. It's like, can't win the big one. My final point of McDermott will be this. Does it feel like, when I was thinking about this, does it feel like McDermott, we just know who he is? Like, I don't think there's another level to McDermott as a coach. Like, even if he were to get a job somewhere else, like I think if he got fired, he would earn a job somewhere else. Say he lands in, I don't know, Dallas or whatever in a year or two. It's like, I feel like, okay, well, just pencil them in for making the playoffs and then losing. He feels like a Kirk Cousins of a coach, or a Dak of a coach, where it's like, yeah, I know what I get. Like, it's solid, but that's what I get. Like, that's what I get. And then occasionally a really bad interception or a bad 9/11 quote. Like, that's what you get. All right, I can't hear you again. You muted yourself again.
Now, I'm having to mute myself because I want to make sure there's no feedback coming through.
Well, you sound good to me.
All right, good. So moving on to the 3 and 4 spot, then that is an interesting conversation because Gerard Mayo could very well put himself in that 3 spot, but he's a rookie. We don't know.
No,
we do know Robert Saleh has put out phenomenal defenses every year he's had the coach. So that's
Saleh,
how that shakes out.
To me, Saleh I think Saleh, if he gets fired at the Jets, he should have a job like quickly.
I agree. I think he is a good head coach.
I think he's a really good head coach, and I do think Saleh has an it factor that Doug McDermott doesn't have. I just think that his problem is New York's organization is very flaky, very unsuccessful, very poorly run, and he has dealt with. He was handed Zach Wilson, and now he's been handed an injured, aging communist in Aaron Rodgers. And so he's got a lot to deal with. I like Robert Saleh a lot. Yeah. I would, now, when I think about Saleh versus, like, I put him in my situation, right? I think I'd stick with Eberflus over Saleh, just in the sense that I think they're both about the same, but I do like that Eberflus is kind of like he's not a fancy guy. Like, Saleh does seem a little like New York, good looking, swagger, quotes. And maybe that's just because he's in New York. But I think that Saleh's in that category of, like, I think a lot of people would argue he's a better coach than Eberflus, and I think that's fine. I think he's somewhere in that, like, 12 to 15 range of a head coach. I think he's higher than you think when you actually start to look at these names. And Gerard Mayo, very excited for him. He's got the chance to do what DeMeco Ryans did last year, where no one really believes in you. Former player in your former place. Go put up a hell of a season, and let's talk about you in a year from now.
Yeah, and the problem is, I feel like if they have a lot of success, the New York Jets, it's going to all be credited to Aaron Rodgers, especially because of the disparity between the two, even if Robert Saleh deserves his flowers all the same. Unfortunately, but that's part of being the head coach too, right? Like, he's not doing this for the recognition.
It'll go Aaron, ayahuasca, defensive line, Robert Saleh. That's the order in which the success.
Somehow Alex Guerrero will work himself.
Joe Rogan right after Saleh. It'll go Joe Rogan, then Saleh, and then we'll come on back to the rest of it. I think for me, that's the key for Saleh is, again, he deserves a lot of credit for keeping the ship together. Saleh deserves a lot of credit for keeping the ship together through a lot of adversity. You want to move on to the AFC West, which I think we both would agree is the best coached football division in football.
Yeah, it is. It really is. That's especially the top is very heavily weighted. Antonio Pierce is really the wild card that we're trying to figure out, right? But uh, yeah, no, right now it's Andy Reid number one, and there's not really a close second. So I feel like we can kind of probably quickly breeze
Yeah.
through that, unless you have any thoughts in
No,
particular
Andy's
on that
one.
number one spot.
Andy's one. I'm interested who you put two.
Yeah, number two, I put Jim Harbaugh, and
Me too, baby.
yeah, let's go.
Jim. I put Jim too. I
Yeah.
love Harbaugh. He just came off a national title, and he's proven in the NFL already. Now, again, that was a decade ago, but I don't think Jim Harbaugh, because of what he's done at Michigan and being near the game, it was not like John Gruden where he was successful 10 years ago and then was an analyst. Like, he's been in the grind for 10 years. So I don't think the game has passed Jim Harbaugh by. And I think that Jim Harbaugh in a 5-year window will be amazing. And then what does year 6, 7, 8 look like when he wears you down and you're sick of his getting rid of the music already? He's gotten rid of the music at Chargers camp, I've heard, and things like that.
Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see. So I have Harbaugh 2 as well. Who do you go 3?
He's just super consistent. That's what like Jim Harbaugh is going to produce results all the time. Whether or not he's going to win the Super Bowl every year or get to the championship game, that's a toss up for really anybody other than like Andy Reid and Bill Belichick and stuff. But his consistency and we know like we're going to get a good product out there is why he's number 2, and it's why Sean Payton's number 3. I personally think Sean Payton is one of the most overrated coaches of all time, while still saying he's a really good head coach. I do think he's a really good head coach.
I agree.
I still think people lift him up to be this Hall of Fame caliber head coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing it. He had a lot of 7 to 9 years with New Orleans. He had good pockets of like 3 seasons where they were really, really strong, but then they fell off. And then it's 3 more seasons, really, really strong. And then, just inconsistency at times. And I mean, the guy's had Drew Brees, for the majority of his career. He goes 9-8 his final season with New Orleans. Then he comes back last year and signs onto a job with Russell Wilson. Like, he knew what he was getting. And I think they should have gone better than 8-9, all things said and done. I don't think Sean was willing to adjust his coaching style at all to fit the personnel that he inherited, which included Russell Wilson, of course. So yeah, right now Sean Payton's got to be number 3 for me. He can obviously change this if he puts together if he rebuilds the Broncos and puts them on a trajectory for like 5 straight years of winning seasons and does really good. Okay, but Jim Harbaugh's won everywhere he's gone at all times. I'm not seeing that from Sean Payton just yet.
No, and Sean Payton's been around a long time. He's the 20th all-time leader in coaching wins in the regular season, but that's still tied with John Harbaugh. But John Harbaugh has been coaching less time. He was a head coach for less seasons. And
I mean, is Sean Payton a Hall of Famer in your mind if he were to retire today?
I think Sean Payton's close. I think he's close.
He's probably close.
But I think the pressure is on. Like, the pressure is on, because I'd argue similarly to Tomlin, where the pressure is on, like, your career and success right now is all tied to one guy who we argue is a top 10 quarterback of all time. He is, in Drew Brees. And it's like, so where do we go from there? I agree with you. I think he's a good head coach, but I think he and the media sometimes think of him as this
prodigy,
guru, absolute elitist. Right now, I think he's the 3rd best head coach in that division. I think he's a top 10 head coach in the NFL right now, though. I do think if you had to go that way, and he is to put a huge target on his back. He took the 6th quarterback off the board at pick number 12, and it's his guy, and it's the guy he says is like Drew Brees. So go make him Drew Brees, and then I'll bump you up to number 2 on this list next year.
Yeah, and no excuses with this one either, because you can't come back to us in 2 years and say, well, he was the 6th quarterback. No, like, you could have
went all in
to build up your roster and go take a quarterback next year or figure it out. So
no one would have blamed them. No one would have blamed them.
Yeah, no, they're tied to this. They are tied to this for sure. And Sean Payton is equally tied. Antonio Pierce could be a really good head coach as well. We just don't know enough yet. But this could.
He's in a tough division.
Even strengthen its position as the best division of head coaches if Antonio Pierce has a 9-8 season this year.
No, I love Antonio Pierce. I'm pumped for him to get this job. I'm pumped that the Raiders didn't force the quarterback either. I think that it's really
Yeah.
smart for them to say, hey, we improved our roster in this offseason. We're going to be competitive as heck, but we hope to be competitive as heck while also ending up with a top 5 pick. And then we can get the guy for us to go in there and compete at a high level with two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that are in our division. So yeah, I'm all about the Raiders and Antonio Pierce being 4, and it's not a negative on that. I think that depending on how the years goes, like I said, I predict the Raiders could have more success than the Broncos this year. I really think that's a possibility. And if it is, I will credit a ton of that to Antonio Pierce.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a rookie quarterback with a high ceiling. They have Gardner Minshew.
Yeah,
they have the definition of the spot starter. So we'll see what happens.
All right, let's go to your division, the NFC North. This was a fun one to work through as well.
Can I make the argument, and I think maybe at the end we can kind of debate this really quickly. I think the NFC North is in the debate for the third best head coached division in football. It's in the debate. I think
AFC West, then AFC North, and then
I think
the NFC North.
And I do think the NFC West has something to say about that.
Yeah.
But I think that's where, like, today, right now, that's the toss up. Like, it's a toss up for that third spot between the NFC
really good division. Really good
North
division.
and the West. I have Dan Campbell 1. I have Matt LaFleur 2, Kevin O'Connell 3, Matt Eberflus 4. I'm not a homer. My guy has a lot to prove. This is a big year for Matt Eberflus. Kevin O'Connell, I think, is a very good head coach, but Matt LaFleur, to me, deserves to be at the 2 because even though their careers are very similar right now, they both have had some success. The fact that Matt LaFleur, the way he called out his quarterback early last year in those press conferences, remember, we said it. Matt LaFleur was saying, well, my quarterback's making some really shitty reads, and even though we're trying to coach him out of it, he was very honest at the microphone with that they were losing because of their quarterback. And the way he then rallied that team to be a throw away from beating San Francisco in San Francisco for a trip to the NFC title game, Matt LaFleur deserves a ton of credit for that. I hate to say it because I despise his organization, but I think he's a very good head coach. I only put him at 2 because I think there is something uniquely special about Dan Campbell in the same way that I think there was something uniquely special about John Madden. I'm not saying that Dan Campbell's as good of a head coach as John Madden.
I get it. The energy, though.
But there is something. Madden was a great X's and O's guy, but there was also a gravitas and a personality to him that you could not deny. You just could not deny. There is no one in the NFL right now maybe more likable for their players besides Andy Reid. I'd go Andy Reid 1, Dan Campbell 2. There is nothing but bleed for this guy. He represents his city perfectly. And by getting his team within a play or two away from a Super Bowl, what he's done for the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell can be my head coach any day. I think Dan Campbell, if we were just going 1 through 10, where is he in the top 10? It's hard for me to put him in the top 5, but he is sniffing that. He is the leader of the clubhouse in that 6 through 10 group for the next guy to break into the top 5 head coach in the NFL. I love Dan Campbell, love what he's done, and I think he deserves to be number 1 here.
I love Dan Campbell as well, and I if I was just like a personal choice of who I would want to be the head coach of my team, if we were just like starting from scratch and we didn't have the choice of Mike Tomlin, of course, I would say, oh, Dan Campbell, like that'd be awesome. But for number 1 here, I put Matt LaFleur because of the production.
Yeah, he's been very productive. Multiple
Dan
NFC
Campbell
title
turned
games
around an organization, so that to me is like the biggest plus in his pros column, is that he took a perennial loser and made them winners. And to your point, all of the players absolutely love playing for him. He's a leader of men, clearly. But Matt LaFleur went to 4 straight NFC championship games. I know he did that with Aaron Rodgers, but then to have the season he had last year with a Jordan Love, who many had written off as a complete bust.
Midway through the year, it was the Packers might be drafting a quarterback.
Yeah,
people forget how that year ended. It's impressive.
Yeah, no, and his now that the years have gone by and we've gotten used to it, he's probably fallen off the list of what everyone talks about, the, super smart, uh, dial it up, analytics and X's and O's guy, because the Mike McDaniels, the Sean McVays have more maybe like name recognition and staying power. But Matt LaFleur's pretty close in that conversation with those guys, and he's super talented, and that's stuff that can and will last for a long, long time. So he's number one. Dan
he's
Campbell,
too good looking.
Very close.
He's too good looking. That is a problem.
He's a good looking guy. Good looking guy.
Too good
sure.
looking. Yeah, basketball coach, it works. I don't think it works in the NFL.
Dan Campbell could curl about 3 Matt LaFleur's, though, so there is that as well.
I love Dan Campbell.
Kevin O'Connell 3 for me too.
He's a great 3. When you start to look around the threes in the NFL, you could argue he's like, I'd take him over Shane Steichen. I would take him over Robert Saleh. My other 3s we talked about, I'd take him over Kevin Stefanski. I'd take him.
I might take him over Zach Taylor.
I'd take him over Sean Payton and Zach Taylor. Yeah. I mean, he is a very good 3. I think I'd take him over the 3 in the NFC West, which we're going to talk about here shortly. So I think he is one of the reasons why I think this is the 3rd best coach division in football, because of his approach to the game, former quarterback. Again, and I think also one of the things that gets forgotten about him, because he's kind of nerdy looking, he's like every bit of 6'6". Like he is a large man. And I do think there was a time when that, like during that quarterback series on Netflix where he was screaming at Kirk, and Kirk had to be like, all right, I'm sorry. Like he's I think there's a level of like, you don't fuck with Kevin O'Connell. Like he's kind of like, he's got a little bit of that to him. And,
he's a dude.
So I love Kevin O'Connell. I hate that my division is just loaded with like likable, awesome coaches. And then it's like,
and young.
And then it's like, young. We got the guy who he got a haircut this offseason. You see that? Matt Eberflus got a haircut.
Working with the beard sometimes. He got a beard. Sometimes not.
He's got a beard and a haircut. Look out.
But you know what Matt Eberflus has that all of these guys don't? Caleb Williams. Caleb and
the Bears.
Williams.
So I will say this. Matt Eberflus has a chance, depending on how this year goes, to move up a spot on this. I think I will say in Matt Eberflus's credit, once he got Montez Sweat, a difference-making defensive player for the first time in his 2 years as a coach, a year and a half in, his defense went from a bottom 20 defense to a top 10 defense. And that is, it goes to show you the scheme is there. The fit is there. The understanding is there. The players needed to be there. And you add in that one giant piece, and all of a sudden Jalen Johnson is balling out. And the back end of that defense looks really good. So I think this Bears defense is improved. A full year in this system for guys like Edmonds, Edwards, Sweat. Jalen Johnson got his money. I think Matt Eberflus has a chance to move up in this ranking because it can't get any worse. It was a very, very bad first year, an awful first year, and a second year that was defined by a lackluster effort down the stretch in some crucial games, even though his defense did play better.
All right, let's go to the Poopy Bowl of the NFC South. And coaches, no offense to all.
I wasn't ready for that at all, but it's so true.
This is a rough one. Look, 2 of these guys, we don't even know what we're getting. If they're amazing head coaches, they could help resurrect the NFC South.
It is funny because a year ago at this time, I was calling for the job of the guy I have number 1, Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles is my number 1.
I know.
And a year ago, I was saying that Tampa Bay should tank and they can fire Bowles mid-season.
And now it's like, dude, sign this guy to a $500 million contract.
And now it feels like, hey, you got some culture there and you got some stability.
Yeah, they look good. They got a quarterback.
I think he deserves to be number 1 because he in this division, because of the people you have 2 new coaches. And the guy who else was there is maybe one of the worst coaches in NFL history. I just can't stand him. And I might change my rankings on the fly here now just because. No, I may leave it.
I put Dennis Allen 2, and that was only because I have no idea
So I
about these
put
moves.
Raheem Morris too because he's been a coach before, right?
All right.
He did a lot for that defense in Los Angeles the last 2 years.
Yes.
And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt of when he was a head coach for it, he was very, very young. He's still extremely young. But like, all right, what can you learn from this? How do you grow? And so I give him, he can't be worse than Allen. He's better than Allen. And so
maybe though.
I put Allen 3. I put Allen 3. And then at 4, Dave Canales, who, you know the story with Dave Canales and the whole like sex addiction?
No.
Okay.
Wait, maybe I did hear this. But I don't know the specifics of it. I mean, that sounds familiar, but that I don't know anything about
All
it.
right. Talk for a second and let me find this here.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we were going, through this list, and the reasons I have Dennis Allen at number 2 over Raheem Morris, I've listed as like, I just don't know what I'm getting. I also think Dennis Allen it's been bad. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but at the same time, like I do think that he's gotten there's been a floor that won't be dropped out in New Orleans. Like if he was the worst, I feel like New Orleans would have won 3 games or 2 games.
True. Okay, that's fair.
Like he's done enough with the defensive line. He's done enough with like, okay, we'll work with Derek Carr and have a respectable offense that can at least, do stuff. So that's, I mean, it's a low bar. But that's what's put me there for Dennis Allen. Raheem Morris could, I mean, if there's one division with the most variance, it's this one. I mean, Raheem Morris could be number 1 next year. Dave Canales could be number 2. Who knows? We can go up and down the board. But I'm curious what this.
So Dave Canales. Now this shout out to Pardon My Take. They were the first ones that brought this to my attention when he got hired. Someone on Pardon My Take brought this up to them. So Dave Canales has a book that he's written, and if you know what Dave Canales looks like, he is an extremely good-looking man. He is like
best looking coach in the NFL by far.
He might be, and he's very ripped, and he's a young guy. He's 42. Well, apparently, he wrote a book. He's extremely, extremely religious. So, like, he doesn't like do a press conference where he doesn't talk about religion, and it's all because. Well, it's not all. Well, he's leaned hard into his faith because he was basically caught cheating on his wife. His wife was going to leave him, and then he in order to save his marriage, he went to an extreme faith-based couples counseling.
Gotcha.
And his wife and him co-wrote a book about the dangers of pornography.
Oh, they co-wrote it?
Well, yeah. So the dude is basically like, at that point, listen, if you cheat on your wife and you're cheating on your wife and she catches you like you're like addicted to porn, you have 2 options. You have the embarrassment of, I got to save this marriage. And so my wife's going to make me write a book where I admit I'm addicted to porn. And I go to faith-based couples counseling for years. Or you just say, listen, let's just call it what it is. Let's get divorced. And I'm going to keep being a football coach and live my life. He chose the latter, where his wife basically says, like, I own your balls now. You're dead. You're mine now. Can you imagine being in the position? You write a book. You say, I cheated on my wife because I was addicted to porn. Listen, that type of man,
but also,
that's a tough spot.
He could be very genuine, which is almost scarier in some
also
regards.
Scary too. I was so addicted to porn.
Have, complete and total.
So Dave Canales, I just got to say this: if he loses and he doesn't win a lot, it could be there's a lot of internet. There's a lot of great quotes from the book that could go viral. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
there's a lot of great quotes from the book.
Oh my gosh, people honestly, some of the players should just take a line from the book and have it written on the whiteboard every Monday.
The book,
after the game.
How can you be a leader of men as a former porn addict who basically said, I don't want to lose my wife, so she's making me write a book about how I was a porn addict and now I go to extreme religious couples counseling.
Yeah, he'll come in for the morning meetings after a really brutal loss, and there's just the quote on the board. Sometimes it can be too hard.
Yeah,
it's written on quotes, and the guys are like, yeah, coach. That was a tough, hard loss. Hard loss.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
feel
too
like
hard to
maybe
overcome.
maybe he was in the Ashley Madison dump or something. I don't know.
Oh
Maybe.
God.
But yeah,
Wow.
look it up. Dave
Well, look,
Canales, porn addiction, alcohol, porn addiction, infidelity, his marriage to Lizzie Canales. And
that's got that's got a hints of like a Philip Rivers being on that local access TV show.
yeah, he has ceased
So
alcohol and resisted the lure of pornography, embodying a renewed dedication to both his marriage and his coaching career. Listen, if your coach can't have a drink after a tough game because he's worried then he'll end up, 30 pages deep on Pornhub in the comments, I don't know
there
if
are
I
some
want
deeper issues to work
I don't
through.
know if I need him to be the leader of men. When he's in those intense conversations with David Tepper, David Tepper might have the book out. And I'm just saying, he might have to bring the book out.
Oh, man, that's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, the NFC South certainly has a colorful group. Bookended by one Dave Canales.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take ourselves to the NFC East now. Now we'll get to the NFC East, as I alluded to earlier, with the Commanders.
This is a tough one.
Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders.
Very tough.
Yeah. It is. Giants as well. I think I said Commanders twice. Whatever. This was a tough one. I think I'm going to surprise you with my number one.
You go first because I hate my ranking. I really
Dan
do.
Quinn is number one for me. I
hate that.
I truly think Dan Quinn's a phenomenal coach. I think he got kind of was scapegoated in some ways
in Atlanta
and rebuilt an entire Cowboys defense. I like him a lot. I just don't trust any of these other guys, to be honest. I guarantee we're not going to have any of the same rankings for any of them.
All right, what do you go to then?
Four. This is going to be the one where I'm completely like.
Just let me hear yours then. Let's just go then.
Yeah, number 2 is Nick Sirianni for me.
Mm.
Number 3 is Mike McCarthy, and 4 is Brian Daboll. I have Daboll 4. You probably have Daboll 1, I'm guessing.
I have Brian Daboll 1.
Yeah. Dude, what has he done?
I have Mike McCarthy 2. I have Sirianni 3 and Dan Quinn 4.
We're completely
I hate this. Listen, I'm not gonna stand here and die on the hill for any of this because I'm with you. Like
I hate this grouping.
It's tough. I think what I go off of is I just say to myself, okay, tomorrow the Bears have a head coach opening and you say you get to choose your head coach, but it comes from the NFC East. I think in my panic mode, I would go, I need offense, and I love Brian Daboll's offensive mind. Like, he is the reason Josh Allen, since he left Josh Allen, it has not been the same 100% for Josh Allen. And what he did with Daniel Jones in year 1 was extremely impressive. Year 2 was a disaster. It was. But there were moments still with that offense you're like, okay, it's not the scheming. It's a lack of talent. It's a lack of institutional success. A lack of and the head coach is to blame for some of that. You got to coach guys up, right? But I just saw, so I went with that. Mike McCarthy I have over Sirianni because while I think that Nick Sirianni has a slightly higher ceiling than Mike McCarthy does have a Super Bowl ring. He's been doing it a long time, and I do know what I get from Mike McCarthy. He is the offensive Sean McDermott, where you're like, okay, that's good. You did good. You got me to 10 wins, and then, it flames out. Sirianni, I think the floor is very low. I think Sirianni's hanging on by a thread. And I think part of it is he was young, energetic. He was propped up by Shane Steichen and Gannon, who are now head coaches in their own right. They went to a Super Bowl in the back of a really talented quarterback and 2 really good coordinators and really star players. And then last year when it was like, hey, this is your team now, all we got was infighting, ugliness, and a team that fell apart late. Absolutely fell apart. So Sirianni, to me, he can go right back up if he has a great year and he gets control of the reins, or he can go like basement, probably doesn't have a job in the NFL next year if he gets fired from the Eagles. And with Dan Quinn, I I worry Dan Quinn is old school defensive head coach in modern NFL. That's my only concern. When we last saw Dan Quinn, those last couple years in Atlanta were not great. They weren't disasters. They weren't 3-13, right? They weren't. They just weren't.
Right.
They had expectations of Super Bowl, and they were 7-9, 7-9, 9-7, and it just wasn't right anymore. I love that he waited and stayed in Dallas. I think that was smart of him not to jump right back into it. I do think, though, there's a reason why Seattle, it would have been the right spot, him to go back to Seattle. Yet they chose a young, unproven defensive coordinator over him. And then it just kind of was like, oh, well, the Washington job. And I do think he'll be successful in year 1 and year 2 with Washington because he knows this division extremely well. But what will it look like in years 3, 4, 5? Can he help develop a young quarterback? I'm unsure of all of that. So it's tough. It's tough. All 4 of these are like C's. I don't want to do anything with them, but I have to rank them 1 through 4. So on potential alone, I think Brian Daboll has the highest ceiling still. And I know that's different than the way I ranked them before, but I hate them all. Like, I don't want, would I take Brian Daboll as my head coach right now in Chicago over Matt Eberflus? Yes. I think I would stick with Eberflus over the others, honestly. If you told me today you can swap. Because I at least think that Eberflus has the culture going in Chicago, and then you got to rebuild it if you're Dan Quinn. Sirianni, I don't trust right now. And Mike McCarthy, I just don't think the ceiling is high with Mike McCarthy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's that's pretty much spot on to what I'm
Are
thinking.
Any of them top 10 coaches for you?
No. Yeah, no, they're all C's.
I don't think so
I agree
either.
with that.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Is in my head, I'm like Harbaugh, Tomlin, McDaniel, Reed.
You'd put Peyton in the top 10, I'm sure.
McVay, Shanahan,
Campbell,
Campbell.
They're
the
these
highest.
Guys are all bottom 15. Like,
they're all in that 12 to 20.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough.
Like, my reasonings, real quick, to go through them are that Dan Quinn, and maybe if I thought about it a little bit more, and after hearing you talk, like, maybe I would switch this up slightly, but. Dan Quinn, I just like, I feel comfortable, I guess would be the word.
Okay.
Sirianni, I do think
the floor is high with Dan Quinn, right? I agree. I think we agree. It's like a 7-9. Like, you're a 7-9 with Dan Quinn.
Yes. Yeah, and so there's a comfort level there. Sirianni, I think, because of what he's done with a very young roster overall, does need to be warranted. And I know there's a lot of things we don't like, and sometimes he acts like a player too much, and sometimes he doesn't see. But, like, overall, he's gone to the Super Bowl, and despite a bad meltdown last year, no doubt,
they still made the playoffs.
Mike McCarthy, it's just we've seen it a million times, and I just don't think there's any movement there. And then Brian Daboll, I'm waiting to see it. Like, is he another one of those great coordinators who's just not that great as a head coach? I don't know. I mean, we've had plenty of examples of that in the Mike Martzes and the Adam Gases and Wade Phillips, Vic Fangio. Like, there's a lot of these guys who are phenomenal coordinators that just don't make it out as a head coach. And I'm not saying he's that yet, but I'm saying I don't think he's graduated to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, he's a good head coach. He's got it down pat.
Can I ask you this? My final point of this will be, if at the end of the season all 4 of those guys were fired, which is the one that's most likely to get a head coaching job before the next season?
It's probably Daboll.
Yeah, it's
probably Daboll. But
because
I think
of the potential,
because of him being offense and him being young.
Yeah, and he's got an attitude. Like, he's a short, stocky. Like, there's an attitude there that I think.
Football dude. He's a football guy. Yeah. No, I agree.
Let's wrap it up.
NFC West time. All right, let's do it. We got the 49ers, the Rams, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Seattle Seahawks. I guess the big question is going to be who's 1, who's 2, really, right? Because I mean, that's the biggest toss up I think
It is.
between
I
the
give
two
the
of us here.
advantage to the person who, if it ain't got that ring, I don't want to hear a thing. I go with Sean McVay.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
Kyle Shanahan can't. Right now, the narrative is he can't win the big one. He's an incredible coach. An incredible coach. Can't win the big one. So I go McVay, Shanahan, and then I give Gannon over Mike McDonald. I have to read his
Same.
name because I still can never remember it. All season long, Seattle. God bless you knowing that your coach is named Mike McDonald.
Yeah.
So Gannon I don't like, but I'll give him the advantage. I at least know that he was better than the pew, pew, pew. Like I thought it was going to be a total disaster.
Yeah, better than expected.
Better than expected.
Definitely.
But McVay and Shanahan are two of the top 5, in my opinion, coaches in the NFL. They are 2 top 5 guys, and they're both going to be head coaches for many, many years to come, as long as they want to. And it sucks they're in the same division, similar to the Harbaugh Reed thing, because one of them is going to always have to play in the wild card. One of them is going to win that division. If Kyle Shanahan can eventually prove in a big game that he can manage it and get his team to a victory, then he will instantly become maybe in that top 2 or 3 coach of all in the NFL right now. But right now,
Sure.
I have Sean McVay over him.
Got to get over the hump, no question. Yeah, Jonathan Gannon definitely. I wouldn't say impressed, but he exceeded expectations.
Yes, great way to say
so
it.
low.
They were very low. Pew,
they were very low.
Shots, explosives.
It truly is, and that was put out by the Cardinals. Like
it was so bad.
They showed the video. They weren't like, "Hey, can we do another take? Can we do a take of that?" And just
can you stop being a psycho in front of your players?
Just don't do that. But no, I mean, he had the sample size with Kyler wasn't that bad, and now he'll have the full season. We can fully judge it, I think, after this year as to what we're working with. Mike McDonald, too, I think we're going to have to extend a little bit of grace to this guy, because I think even after this year, there's a lot of
they need to
not
reset.
Great roster. There's not much depth in Seattle. Their defense is kind of in shambles.
They need to reset.
Quarterback situation's up in the air. Who knows what's going to happen with DK Metcalf? There had been, trade rumors in the air.
Yeah.
And aging Tyler Lockett. So they've got Jackson Smith and Jigba and a good young running back core of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. But outside of that, so they've got some weapons, but there's a lot of question marks in Seattle.
I expect Seattle to be competitive, though. I think he'll come in. He'll give a new energy. I think they'll be competitive, but it's a tough division. Gino, it's like Gino now has a chance to show it wasn't a total fluke.
Right.
2 years ago, great. Last year, okay. If he can have a great year again, then it's like, all right, well then, it wasn't a fluke.
They haven't ripped it down to the studs. They have things to work with, and so they can be competitive for that reason. You're right.
Yeah.
But I would say if they win 5 games next year, depending on how that happens, I think that Mike McDonald might, should get a year 2, because
agreed.
Can they get a quarterback in there? Can they figure those, where the direction of this franchise is going?
Totally.
There's more pressure on the Cardinals to perform because they have the quarterback and they've just got the,
he
number
deserves,
2.
if he's solid, he'll deserve a chance to be like, all right, let me get my quarterback now. Right.
Yes.
If it's not, if they're ugly and they lose a lot of games, this team shouldn't lose a lot of games. It should be a 7, maybe 8 win team.
Yeah.
If they only win 3 or 4 games, then it's like, is he the right guy?
Right. Yep. Very true. So, all right. Well, that's a look at the list. That was a fun one. Really look forward to seeing how this one ages and pans out come the end of the season. But
all right.
I think we feel pretty confident, at least with a few of those for sure.
Yeah.
So, cool breakdown on the divisions. Excited. We've got some more guests coming up this month that I'm excited to talk shop with here on the show. And then before we know it, training camp will be off and running in just a few weeks. So should be very exciting to see those things develop. The June 1st deadline for a lot of roster or I should say payroll decisions has just passed, which means there might be some trade talks starting to heat up in the next couple of weeks, because once June 1st hits, teams have more flexibility with how they work their contracts. So some players couldn't be traded until after June 1st because they were owed a certain amount of money ahead of time. I don't even know all of the full detailed specifics on that, but just know now that it's after June 1st, there might be some more movement in the NFL.
Especially with guys holding out as camps begin and you just want to move on from a headache. Like, there's going to be some stories for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So that does it for us here on the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan at FB Lounge Pod on any social media that you might be on. Also, check us out at forfantasysakeqc.com for all of the other shows, along with all of our content over this past year. And yeah, we got some great stuff there at the For Frequency Sake Podcast Network. Please check us out and everybody else out. It really helps us help grow the show, grow the following, and bring more shows like this to you. But that'll do it for us today. We'll see you back here next time.